Let me tell you about Meter, the company rethinking network infrastructure from the ground up. Tired of juggling multiple vendors and fragmented tools? Meter delivers a complete networking stack hardware, software, and services, all integrated to give network engineers the deep control and visibility you need. Thanks for Meter for making this possible. Go to meter.com/NAN to book a demo now. That's METER.com/NAN. Hello and welcome to the Network Automation Nerds podcast, where we explore the latest in network automation from a practitioner's perspective. I'm your host, Eric Cho, a network engineer who loves everything about network automation. Today, we're thrilled to have a returning guest, Tim McConnaughy, hybrid cloud network architect, author, and co-host of the Cables to Cloud podcast. Tim was last with us on episodes 39 and 40, where we dove deep into content creation and self-publishing. Since then, he has been very busy delivering content on Cables to Cloud podcast, as well as working on hybrid cloud networking, AWS architecture, Azure, all that good jazz. He recently completed a 5-part series titled Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, where he reflected on the path he has been on for the last several years. Today, we'll focus on the evolution of cloud networking and get Tim's perspective on where the industry is headed, his personal experience, and so much more. So, Tim, welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back, Eric. I hadn't thought about it before you said that about the last time I was on the show, but yeah, man, that was when we did the publishing one with you, me, and Nick, right?
Yeah. So I recently recorded, yet to be released, but by the time this episode released, we'll hear that it's episode 100th, and we did the reflection. And there was a question about what was my favorite episode.
Hmm.
I don't even remember we covered that because it was such a jam-packed session, but
Hmm.
there was a question where I reflected on that, and I put out Nick's first
Yeah.
episode because I miss him. I think
Yeah.
he did a lot of good stuff, and I mean, secretly, I always try to measure up to Nick.
Good luck. Good luck.
So, so you're, the episode that you appear with Nick as well. It was one of my favorites, and because content creation is near dear to my heart.
Yeah, no, that was great. And I really appreciated being included with you guys.
Of course, and since then you've published even more books and then did even more podcast episodes. So I'm sure on that same topic you would have had maybe a different in-depth perspective or maybe like different perspective. So I don't know. Is that like a plan for the next episode, or it's like we haven't even finished this one and we're looking forward to another one?
Yeah, I mean it's cool. The industry is so tight, and then the people in the industry become such good colleagues and work together that for people that gel, it's so easy for us to just sit down and just have a conversation about just about anything. So yeah, you're definitely one of those people. So yeah, yes, let's do another one
Let's
at some
finish this
point.
one first, and then
Yeah.
like do another planning. But you're right. Like I mean, bring up the Nick, and it always makes me sad, and I try to keep
Mm,
on a positive note. But you're right. I think I also just finished planning, well, not planning, but hosted the inaugural event for Washington or slash Seattle Network User Group, and it was a big success. We had about 50 plus people turn out. It was
nice.
lively conversation, and we didn't even capture maybe half of the conversation that was there. That was interesting and innovative, and even just shooting the breeze, right? So
Yeah.
so I think planning it wasn't easy, but just having this turnout and just everybody participating was worth the effort.
Hmm.
Finding sponsors, man, that's tough.
I think that's probably the hardest part of the entire process.
It was just like, hey, you could pay us money, but you're not gonna get to sell, because that was the no selling zone. And
Yeah.
so that's always the hardest part. So we had a few conversations that required, twisting a few arms at NTC. Although NTC was great, like Network to Code, they were great.
Hmm.
They didn't ask a lot of questions. They were sponsors to begin with, and they were community advocates.
Excellent.
But yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Very cool.
So, Tim, back to this episode. We will probably leave the more elaborate background information since you were on, and we actually went through a longer version of your background and context. So we'll leave listeners who are interested in that for those 2 episodes. But just in the, I don't know, 5-10 seconds, as short as you could give, maybe just tell us a little bit about your background. Maybe not going back to childbirth, but like we went back wherever you want to go, and especially regarding your hybrid cloud experience.
So, I mean, I've been in the industry since, oh, geez, for 20 something, 20 years now.
Yeah. Well, once it beyond 20 years, we'll just say 20
Yeah,
plus.
just say 20 plus years. I don't remember anymore.
Right.
Started as a network engineer. At some point I got into cloud. I ended up leaving Cisco to go to
Hmm.
cloud. So this was like 2021, actually. So it's
Mm,
about 4 years ago now,
right,
actually. And at the time, I was really getting to networking in the cloud.
right.
At that time, Cisco didn't really have anything that I could work on that was really so. Anyway, that's why I ended up going to over to Aviatrix, which is of course is a multi-cloud networking company. And then I spent the last 4-ish now years there, and I just recently transitioned back to Cisco. So the series that I wrote on my Substack, which that's a whole other thing, trying to figure out is Substack a blog, a feed, like a Twitter feed? It's
It's yes.
it's yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other conversation, right? But I decided, okay, I don't want to host my own blog anymore. Let me just like do a platform. So I started using it for that. And I wrote basically about my experience, not only just at Aviatrix, but also just generally my experience with multi-cloud networking as a category, if you will, over the last 4 years and where we're at and where I think we're going.
Yeah, that's excellent summary. And I want to also bring back into the context. So when we last chat about it, you were already with AVHX, and that's where you
That's right.
published the AWX workbook.
hmm The hybrid cloud handbook.
I have a bookshop right here, but
I believe
yeah,
you.
yeah. I took pictures. Pictures believing. But yeah, so you were already with AVHX, and that was when we chat. I remember you, and also in the blog post, right? Like you talked about it was close to COVID, or maybe it was just right around that time, right? 2000, so
hmm
during COVID, and so you
hmm
were, everybody was at home, the cloud was taking off, and so
Yeah,
that's setting up the context of when you joined.
that's right.
So maybe we dive a little bit deeper into since we last chatted, which was maybe 2022ish or so, and then until now, like what have you been up to? I mean, you kind of briefly went over that you transitioned back and so on, but maybe just get a little caught up on dig deeper, and I think that's set up nicely for why you wrote the blog series.
Yeah, yeah, no, perfect. When we did the last recording, I want to say I'd been at Aviatrix for a period of time. It wasn't like too long. No, I started Aviatrix in February of 2022. So it was like
Mm.
COVID wasn't in the rearview mirror, but it was like,
Oh, it was right in the midst of it, right?
yeah, we were still pretty heavily into it, which is funny because the day after I joined, literally the day after I joined, my new boss was like, "Hey, we need you in Dallas for this sales kickoff." And I was like,
Right.
"What?" And I hadn't left my house in like, a year and a half or whatever.
That was when, like, we're all a little iffy about, getting back into it, because we've been on Zoom for so long.
So anyway, yeah, that's I cover that in the series as well. But to put that in perspective, there, of course, I went and we went to a sales kickoff, and it was just so flashy because that was again early 2022. Cloud networking was super big, like
Mhm.
certainly within the networking circles, but even outside because the cloud service providers, were just kind of starting to understand that okay, we can't get by with these really basic Fisher Price implementations of networking where we just let two things can connect together and that's all you're ever going to need, right? So,
Right.
but Aviatrix was at the and again, this whole thing isn't really about Aviatrix. It just happens to be that
Sure.
that's where I worked, right? There's
Yeah.
other multi-cloud networking companies
Yeah.
was very focused on closing the gap between like network engineers and what they expect and what they kind of need to deliver the five nines of uptime
Right.
on prem in the cloud, where the center of gravity was rapidly, moving to. Part of that very much because of COVID, right? We need to evacuate our data centers and all of that. So.
Right. Can you give us an example of a traditional, like, let's just say I spin up a VM in AWS, right? Like, and so by default, it has a VNet in Azure and, other terms, VPC, right?
BBC.
Yeah, so it has a default VPC, has, natting to begin with, and if I, remember to click on that, IPv4 button, then you have a
Mm,
public IP and I get connectivity, right? So
yeah.
what's so different about that to a network centric, multi-cloud or hybrid cloud strategy?
Mm. Okay, so let's frame it by like what we would do on-prem, and let's
Yes.
think about how it's different, right? So
Perfect.
on-prem, we have the traditional castle and moat type of thing, where the perimeter is very well defined. It's basically whatever outside connects to our network edge, and then we've got our firewall stack, a sandwich, or whatever. We've got DMZs, all of that, right?
Very controlled.
Yeah, very controlled and also very clear. Like this
Right.
is the boundary, right?
Yeah, this is demarcation. There you go. That term that we network engineer all love, right? Here's your demarc.
Here's your DMARC, exactly. and traditionally, depending on what kind of, the military, for example, you'd have like an outside router, then a firewall sandwich, and then you'd have like, okay, now we're protected, and here's our internal network, and here's an inside router. But like, not everybody's like that, right? But the idea is that the perimeter is very well defined, and the perimeter is where we can control ingress and egress, and we're safe as long as we can catch the threats there.
I love the castle and moat, right? So I would imagine like the soldier or like King's Guard, like, it's like
Right.
like a firewall. Go, you're good. Go, you're bad. Like bam, like it push you down to the moat.
With the portcullis that slams down, or like the gate that
Yeah,
lives.
exactly. Game of Thrones style. But yeah, traditional networking, very controlled, clear demarc, and then at least touch points, whether you're sandwiched in or not, like that good packet, bad packet kind of thing. Sure.
Yeah, and east west is the same way, between like your PCI zone and maybe your non-PCI zone, you would have some kind of firewall, some kind of pinning through a firewall to either allow or not allow some of that traffic. It's
Right.
it's still fairly well regimented and designed in a way like that. So then you get to the cloud, and you can build pretty much anything anywhere, right? You've got VPCs that you can build whatever you want.
Right.
You can put your workloads directly connected to the internet with a public IP, as you just said, right?
Yep.
Or not, right?
Right.
Through a NAT gateway. There's a million ways to do it, and the perimeter of your network is now extremely loosely defined.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the big mind shift, if you will, because from a security perspective, of course, we're talking about the fact that, now where do I put the firewall, right? Like,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know,
Everywhere.
everywhere, right?
Yeah. Anything, everything, everywhere. All multiverse style, right? Yeah.
Right. And then you throw in things like multi-cloud networking into it, where now we have different clouds that don't actually have a really good way to connect to each other because they weren't really built with that in mind.
Right.
The cloud was originally every provider built their own cloud to be the one-stop shop, right? Like, you should come here. We've got every service you'll probably ever need. So why go anywhere else, right? So, and that meant that, of course, they're also competing with each other, right? So that automatically puts up barriers to cross connectivity, beyond the very basic stuff. Like, we can do IPsec tunnel, or you can do like a private circuit to your own gear or provider's gear, and then there we'll meet you by, you can connect their private circuit, and now we've got a hairpin,
Right.
through middle mile or your own
I
gear.
have this mental model of where AWS starts to check like IP geo information. And when it's like for Azure IP address or 7024 ASN, it was like automatically blow up just for no reason. Like everything should work. And like per standard RFC, this should work. And they're just like, oh my God. But you're right. Like interoperability is definitely not on the top of mind
Mhm.
for clouds. Like, hey, we have this wall garden. It's so great. Why do you need to go anywhere else?
Right.
Yeah. So how was hybrid cloud in general solve that issue?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So hybrid cloud still exists and will continue to exist, right? Hybrid cloud is literally just cloud plus
On-prem.
extranet. Yeah, whatever this outside of the cloud and it needs to be connected to the cloud, that's not going anywhere, I don't think.
Right.
I don't even think MCNS is necessarily going anywhere, but you have to separate it from MCNS. I say MCNS, I'm talking about multi-cloud networking service.
Sure.
Like, the concept of connecting clouds together, if you will, that concept isn't going anywhere.
Hmm.
But there's also a market that Gartner declared back around this time, saying this is going to be a hot new market. It's called MCNS. And the need to connect all these clouds together is going to drive a lot of business. So I've just completely forgotten what was the question.
Sorry, I no, it was my fault, right? I gave that Game of Thrones, and then automatically your mind goes through like the King's Guard and like
No,
we
no,
the
no.
North we protect. But no, I think what we're on was essentially the 5-part series that you wrote about,
Yes.
and we went through like kind of the first two where at that time it was going gangbusters. Gartner has
Mhm.
this hype cycle. I don't even know where
Yep.
they're at, but it's at the hype cycle. Definitely not mature.
It was growing at that time, right?
So you went to the sales conference. It was all, and I've been to the sales kickoff. It's a lot of wines and beers, a lot of shining lights, and I don't know,
Yeah.
right? I was it in Vegas?
No, it was in Dallas. It was in Dallas. So they rented a big hall and a hotel, actually. It
Okay.
wasn't that bad, but it was within that area, the shining lights and the big stage awards for the sellers and all of that stuff, right?
And
So
then you were pumped, right? Like
yeah,
that
I
was the
just
whole
went
goal.
second day
Yeah, you will
there.
get excited. I'm gonna meet my quota in 5x, and I'll be in the President's Club next year, right? You go into Cancun. So okay, everything was rosy, and then
Yeah.
you went there, you came back, and then you okay, now let's get real, right? Like
Yeah.
let's go meeting that quota. Let's go sell the solution to the customer on our solution, where was MCNS, and
Yeah.
I imagine you have to explain a few times what MCNS was.
So yeah, actually, this is good. What I did for Aviatrix at that time, what I was brought in to do originally, was they call it customer solutions architect or cloud solution. It was really cloud solutions architect, but they call it customer solutions architect because the goal was to attach what they called CSAs to strategic accounts, accounts that were growing, that had adopted a certain amount of Aviatrix, that were going to continue to adopt a certain amount of Aviatrix, and just basically you get assigned almost like a TAM or a customer success engineer, but like with the architecture bent of like you're going to help them with their cloud architecture, you're going to design an Aviatrix cloud network, so your customer can adopt it,
Right.
and that is how it would work. So I would take accounts that were strategic to Aviatrix and basically help them adopt more Aviatrix as part of that was like the goal, but also just to help them with their goals, right? Like just hey, we need to do here's our XYZ objective. Like you as an Aviatrix architect, help us build our cloud network to do that. So the point is with the native gear and then the gap between something like Aviatrix or Alkira, or actually I won't say Prosimo. I never really understood Prosimo, but is to close the gap in what is the feature capability of like you would expect on-prem, but the cloud doesn't give you visibility or control to deliver because it's kind of like Fisher Price because it's the whole hyperplane thing and they can't give that level of control to everybody.
Several layer of abstraction. They definitely going to show you where the sausage is made, but they'll be able to say, "Hey, this is a beautiful sausage. You don't really care about what it's made,
Yeah,
right?" But then
why do
it's
you
like,
care?
yeah, but I do care, right? I do want to know the MAC address and the default gateway, and why did you pick? Anyways, like I mean, I was with Azure and AWS for 10 years, and we saw how the sausage made even in the beginning with pre-VPC, right? Imagine that. So I get everything that you're saying, and I do also get the abstraction. So nobody gets to see everything.
Right.
Neither is the customers or you, MCNS provider, and me, doing the underlays. So yeah, you were brought in, and I love that context as well, Tim, because you talked about meeting the objective, and you
Hmm.
don't talk about technology specific, right? You talked about apps being worked on, or like you talked about business, the revenue being generated, and not the VPCs, the VNets, the
Right.
the NAT gateways, right? So yeah, I think that set up nicely on your journey into this thing where okay, now I'm the solution architect, I'm in charge of meeting the customer's objective where communication is crucial, and then I'll turn around and say, how do I translate that into the technology? Is that the accurate description?
Oh, it's very accurate. It's actually really good. So a lot of times you get people asking you like, what is the difference between an engineer and an architect? That's it, right? At the end of the day, you're talking about outcomes
Yeah.
and then using technology to get to the outcome, not, hey, here's this technology, right? You don't stop at the technology. So yeah, really good.
You don't fall in love with because you have your bias, right? Like,
Hmm.
if you talk to some of the people who are really OSPF focused, right? And then so they start have a bias toward that implicitly or subconsciously, right? Just because they know it so well. And it's like, hey, like whatever. So we get that. And so what happened next?
So again, painting that picture that like, it was a rocket ship.
Right.
The whole MCNS quadrant, if you will, was growing up and to the right. It was not quite hockey stick, but it was getting really good.
Hmm.
So then what happened is honestly for a second, when I was interviewing, I asked a question of the interviewer at that time, which I asked was like, how do you plan to stay ahead of the cloud service providers, right? The service providers, ultimately, any solution MCNS runs on is running on the cloud to some degree, right? So how do you plan to stay in front of them?
That's a great question because Amazon in particular and being ex-Amazonian, right? Like I know like Amazon basics, right? Like let's leave
Yep.
technology for a second. Like if you get this pen that's selling super well, Amazon basics is going to copy it. So if we move that to technology, it doesn't really matter how big or how entrenched that technology with the customer, just ask Elastic or, Kafka, right? Like these are technologies that Elastic, the company, had built on AWS exclusively early on,
Yep.
and Amazon turned around and did open search, right? So yeah, definitely. So I think that was a great question that you asked. And what was the answer?
The person who interviewed me, I respect a lot, and I don't know how I would have gotten a different answer, honestly. His answer was we just have to keep continuing to innovate. We have to keep
Right.
delivering new features, new stuff that the CSPs can't get to because we can
Hmm.
get there as a niche. We can close the last 20%, whatever that looks like. So which is a fair answer.
Right.
But getting back to that, what ended up happening, a couple things, and I cover it in the series as well, is that first of all, the COVID sugar rush was starting to die.
Hmm.
The zero interest rate policy of
Yeah, the quantitative easing you mentioned. Yeah.
QE, right? Exactly. And that meant money starts to be a little harder to get, right?
Right.
So when companies find it harder to borrow money, then it becomes obviously harder to spend the money. And so
Right.
people were starting to see less budget, and at the same time all of the explosive growth in the cloud from the COVID, get everything in the cloud and let's, save our business from so we can deliver business. Those bills were starting to roll in, right? Like the those bills of hey, you built this great cloud application and now you're paying for what you've done essentially, right? Those started rolling in.
Well, let's pause for a minute. So I think maybe some network engineers, they're very focused on the technology. And when we say quantitative easing and, like the sugar rush that have come, we should probably explain a little bit. The best explanation that I have heard before was every time you borrow, you actually pay interest, right? Like if you ever take out a car loan, a mortgage, whatever. So that's the interest, that's your cost of capital. So if your cost of capital percentage wise is zero, it's very easy to beat. If you make like a 1% return,
Yeah, if you make anything, you're
yeah, you make
good.
money, right? But when they raise the interest and when Fed raise the interest, it's the interbank rate and not the, like not the interest rate that we see, right? So
That's right.
they may raise it to like 0.5%. It's not we pay 0.5%, we pay 1 or 2 or every points on that.
It's the prime rate, yeah.
So when your cost of capital is at, let's just carry it out a little bit. If your cost of capital is at 5%, that means you gotta make 6% on your return just so that to cover your previous margin of 1%, right? So that makes it super difficult. And the worst thing is it makes everything difficult. It makes business, who the vendor difficult, it makes the customer difficult. So that's what you're talking about, the cost of just building on top of the regular cost of just the cost of goods sold, now that you need to do even more just to cover the same spread.
That's right. And, at the same time, that these people are actually trying to cut their costs
Right.
because of this reason. We can't borrow money for free anymore.
Right.
We have to show return.
Right.
These cloud bills from what's been built during COVID are coming in, and think about how quickly so many organizations built things.
Hmm.
It's not like people were refactoring their apps during COVID, right? Like to make it run better in the
Yeah, they were
cloud,
just like pounding on features, rolling it out, and building across and go, oh, we need something in Asia Pac. It was so easy to launch, and we use hybrid cloud. Yeah, all these MCNS providers that makes it easy. Yeah. Here's something that will resonate with network engineers everywhere. You know the frustration managing networks across multiple sites with different vendors for switching, wireless, and security. When issues arise, you're jumping between multiple dashboards and vendor support team just to figure out what's wrong. It's inefficient, and frankly, there's a better way. Meter took a different approach. They designed their own hardware, write firmware, and build software stacks that gives you full control and visibility. Everything from ISP procurement to security and SD-WAN, all in one integrated stack. Here's what I love. They're not dumping down networking. They know you're problem solvers who want control. Their approach empowers you to be more productive with deeper network insights, whether you're managing branch offices or large campuses. Thanks to Meter for making this possible. Go to meter.com/NAN to book a demo now. That's METER.com/NAN. Now, back to the show.
Yep, you got it. So one thing that Aviatrix did really well was make it very easy to deploy, right?
Yeah.
And so does Alkira. Again, the whole MCNS market, that was one of the big selling points, was literally with IAC automation, right? With Terraform, it was all Terraform compliant and everything. And so it was really, really simple to deploy a whole cloud network with these products, as it should be. That is a selling point. But what that means is that, of course, so you can very quickly get head over skis once, the bills start rolling in.
Right. Once the macro environment changes, right? So now that you have some blind spots, perhaps, or if you're busy, when you're busy going fast, right? You can't cover
Hmm.
all the things and you might miss a pothole or two. And now that those potholes are becoming apparent and you're just trying to navigate around it, so to speak, And Tim, I want to put into context where you, in the blog post, every single part, you mentioned it. You respect the people there. The people is great teams, and you want to focus on the industry in general, right?
Yes.
Like, let's just put that in right now. That everything we talked about, we might talk about AVHX, but we really refer to the industry or this segment of the market, and not
Yes.
anybody or any company in particular,
That's right. I mean, I can only speak to my experience
right?
at this place, but really it's just more like they're as much along for the ride as everyone in that,
Yeah.
in that industry at that time.
Obviously, right? Because I mean, even if you like think about it, we're all trying to learn AI, but we can learn AI without a model. We can learn AI like without like a company that you would do prompt engineering with. So we use OpenAI or Anthropic or Cloud or whatever, but it's not class specific. We try to stay on point on this is the industry, and we're just using that as an example of it.
Yeah.
So I get everything that you're talking about now that the macroeconomic change, the cost of capital raised, and then, on top of that, the cloud builds, whether that's MCNs or from the
Hmm.
cloud providers themselves, those are strictly fixed costs. And now that fixed cost has rose for your customers. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, on top of that, and I covered this in the thing as well, we were on track and kind of committed to trying to double again that year from a revenue perspective. And it was like, I won't say Titanic, but there was definitely icebergs all around on this one. So,
You're navigating again, not just the potholes, but now it's the icebergs, right? Like now you're in the dark water.
So at the same time, a lot of the contracts, and this was very common to do, again, not focusing on AVH specifically, it's very common when you're trying to get adoption for a software product to write a favorable term, a
Hmm.
favorable contract, whatever, favorable terms for a customer to do adoption,
Right.
with some sort of true up and hey, as you deploy more, we'll true you forward and all of this, right? So think about like all of these things coming together at the same time. It was
Your sweetheart deal just comes to an end. Now you're like the long-term girlfriend that we're taking for granted. Or I don't know if that's a good analogy, but if I offended somebody, please follow up.
Well, I mean, but think about and again, the two things we just talked about, and then just throw this third thing right in there from a timing perspective. It was like perfect storm, right? Like there was
Yeah.
no better timing. You can't borrow money anymore without paying for it. You
Yeah.
are paying more for cloud and you really are trying to cut your costs. And then your contract comes due and we have to true you forward with this large MCNS that you've deployed, where you were before deploying as much as you want with the true forward in 6 months or 18 months or whatever that was.
Yeah.
It was just really bad timing. So what happened was just a really big cluster, like, across the whole MCNS, not just Aviatrix, but really just it came to a kind of a perfect storm where it slowed acquisition down to an insane amount, right? Like
Yeah.
it just, and of course you have customers that, can't afford the bill and they churn or they find a way to architect to move out and because they just can't afford it anymore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, it was like ice water tossed on the MCNS industry at that point.
Doesn't sound like fun to, first. And then, but as a solution architect where you're customer facing,
Yeah,
you design the architect, you're basically the name on the design doc,
yeah.
right? So when people point it, back to you, they don't care about who's behind you or who's making decision on the management level. They just look at you and go, Tim, I can't pay this double the bill, right?
Yeah,
So that makes it tough on you. And
yeah.
or any solution architect, let's generalize it.
Yeah, yeah, truly anybody would be in trouble at that point.
What did you do?
Yeah, so this is where it became really tough to be a CSA in that hot seat because you
Hmm.
have the company behind you trying to meet their targets and trying to work out that stuff.
Right. And as someone who work in a sales org, that's tough, right? Like that's tough that you're doubling and tripling and yeah. Anyways, forget President's Club. You're trying to pay the bills. Yeah.
Right. And so then you have your account manager, they've got their numbers that they're
Right.
trying to meet and then you have the contract negotiations that you don't want to be part of, honestly.
No.
Like you
No.
want to be at arm's length from any money.
Right.
Like as a solutions architect, you really don't want to be in that at all,
Right.
because you want to establish that. Maybe it's obvious, but I'll just say it. Like generally, when you're working with these customers, you get to know these, engineers or architects that you're working with. You have a good working relationship with them, and it's not like you're, at no point are you trying to take advantage of anybody. You're trying to
No.
help them meet their goals,
Right.
And so then this freight train, comes with, and you just really like you just know it's going to destroy your relationship if you have to get pulled into this. So you try very hard to stay out of this discussion.
Right.
But again, like you pointed out, you're still to some degree the face of the customer. And also you're proposing architectures that meet their goals, but now are like bad for them
Yeah.
from a budget perspective. Like they're saying, hey, I can't build this because it's too expensive. Like it's just a place to be, honestly. It was hard.
Back to what you were saying, right? Because I've been on the customer side, I've been on the vendor side. You need that trust. You need
Yeah,
that
that's it.
transparency in between. It doesn't really matter vendor or not, right? Like you're just here trying to do your job. Everybody is. And we
Hmm.
have to trust each other to say, okay, I know you have your objective, but at the end of the day, a part of you is acting on my behalf, right? You're advocating for me internally, and I'm advocating for you in to my bosses and say we should pick vendor XYZ. So it's hard that when some of the fundamental assumptions changed in the equation, and then that as a result, like I said, like nobody feels good about it. So like some customers churned. Now you're back to square one, right? Like now you're trying to design something that fits their budget, but also meets the objective of your employer. And then as well as you could like consciously put your stamp on, right? That you feel comfortable put your name on it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And no matter what you do, there's got to be some trust lost. If not for you personally, then at least for your company. And there's nothing really you can do about that. You just have to accept, okay, like this was a whole screw up. I didn't really have anything I did to cause it or could have done to fix it, but it is what it is. And now I have to move forward and try to rebuild,
Yeah.
that trust.
So I understand that you're just picking up the pieces and you're trying to salvage this thing that all the challenges that you've described. So what was the best outcome that came out of it?
Yeah. So I mean, so some customers, they churned because the bill was too high and I
Yeah.
would not have blamed them and that's the way it is.
They didn't have a choice. Like for some customers don't have a choice. Yeah. Just like you. Yeah.
Yeah, the people that are churning, like the people you're talking to, they're not making the budget decisions, right?
Yeah.
The budget team, the finance team came to them and said, "Get this out of here." Like, like it's cost too much. Get rid of
Yeah,
it.
that wasn't a question, was it? It's like, oh,
Exactly.
okay.
Those are the ones that, you couldn't do anything about. That was done before you ever got involved. The ones where you still have a working relationship, usually it ends up to be something like, the best outcomes are usually, you continue to work with the customer, but now you have to work with them to right size things to be more in line with the budget requirements that they have and still try to meet as many of the objectives and goals as possible, as resilient as possible. That's a much better outcome, like working together to draw down what you've deployed to the point where it's where you want it to be
Right.
than just losing a customer entirely, of course. And then so that was it. That's what I did.
Nice. So I would imagine, it's a deeper trust that you had, right? So I'm sure you love your customers all the same,
Of course.
but there are certain customers that had a deeper trust and a deeper relationship in you.
Hmm.
So that would you say those ones that because it's almost like you deposit your trust and then now you're withdrawing it a little bit and say, hey, you know what? Let's still work together. And that came out with the best outcome. And
Yeah.
in your blog series, you actually talk about different innovative product and the
Hmm.
kind of the pain that the company and yourself went through in facing a difficult situation that different attempts at salvaging and different attempts at innovating. So I won't go into details, but maybe you could just share like an example of on the positive side, right? Like this is what we innovate toward and this has a very bright future in your opinion for this hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, I'm sorry.
It's really both. To be a hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, it's just hybrid is pretty much cloud plus anything, and then multi-cloud is specifically like two or more clouds, right? So anyway, yeah. So one thing that really came out, and I still think has a pretty decent future ahead of it, is this idea of distributing firewalls across the cloud fabric. Like the
Right.
distributed cloud
Right.
firewall is something that I remember I was working with he was an SC at the time. He's the head of product now, actually,
Mm-hmm.
Chris McHenry, and we were working with a customer, big customer, and they were trying to do microsegmentation, and that's where actually some of this started. The product started there with trying to see, hey, how would we deliver microsegmentation?
Right.
And then of course he had a much bigger, like he's a really, really smart dude. He had much bigger ideas. And this idea though that
World domination. But let's
who knows?
start with
Yeah, let's start with
microsegmentation.
microseg.
Yeah, but then we'll
Um,
dominate the world eventually.
But the idea was very solid, and I still believe that it's a very solid idea, which is let's not create the castle and moat. Let's not try to recreate a castle and moat, or more importantly, let's not try to direct all of our traffic to one point for inspection in the cloud
Yeah.
when we have such a diverse like spray of workloads everywhere.
Yeah.
Because you're paying for data transfer in the cloud, so
Yeah.
you essentially could be paying for data you're going to drop once it gets to the firewall.
Yeah.
You still get charged for it.
You haul it all the way from Asia Pac to North America just to drop it.
It's like no one it drops it, right? You just paid whatever
Yeah.
per gigabyte,
Yeah.
which is a really smart idea, I think.
Sure.
So I think that idea of doing distributed cloud firewall is a very cloud friendly, cloud centric, cloud native type of way of providing security. I go over in the blog series of one innovation that I thought like just completely flopped, so I won't take a look at that one. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I felt was actually a good one. I think it's evolved. Not only did it start as a good idea, but it actually has evolved as a product over time and become more robust. We added the ability to do Kubernetes attributes to it, stuff like that, right? It's actually evolved as a product. So that I think is a situation in which, we were able to innovate beyond what the CSPs did, or should I say, not could have done. Obviously, they could do whatever they wanted to do at any time. But, that as a good example.
Yeah, I like that because we couldn't possibly cover everything you wrote, and it's 5 part series, and
Yeah.
each part probably takes about 15 minutes just to read it, and then I had to stop a few times, digest it, maybe went back to some of the context that I wasn't aware of. But what I want to mention and congratulate you on is just this honesty, right? So I don't have the what to be transparent and honest like you did. I mean, I've been to some big companies, the Fortune hundreds and 50s,
Mhm.
and also the startups, right? And so I've seen a lot of how the sausage was made, but I could never bring myself to be as transparent, as honest as you. I
Mm.
wanted to, but at the same time, I don't want to disclose for whatever reason. So I want to congratulate. I think you did a good job on just making the balance of I want to be honest. I want to disclose the challenges honestly to the people out there so that people are aware of this and then see this whole life cycle, right? So here's like, stage one, stage two, to stage three. And I don't know the 5 stages of, anger or whatever, right? Like anger, acceptance, and denial,
Grief,
all of that
yeah,
stuff, right? So
yeah.
I see that whole arc within your article. So I do encourage people to go read it. And I want to congratulate you on that. And I love the Wizard of Oz reference too, by the way. So was that like a Wizard of Oz, or was this something like more like a pop culture-ish song?
So Elton John, one of his famous songs is "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road," and it refers to someone who is basically kind of realized that it was about show business, right? In
Mm-hmm,
Elton John's
mm-hmm.
case, it was about show business, but basically someone who's realized that like it's not really, it's kind of a mirage. It's not
Yeah, yeah.
really happening. So I'm gonna kind of go back to what I believe in and know that's good, and it's gonna, hopefully work out. So yeah, that was kind of the reference built out throughout the whole weaved into the whole thing.
I had a 50% chance of getting right. So there was like the Dorothy Wizard of Oz getting to Emerald City, and then I did see the Elton John reference as well. But I was
Yeah.
just like, oh, maybe it's Dorothy. But anyways, but I think Elton John actually, kind of had a like a relation to that as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah, okay, Tim. So I mean, you're gracious enough to agree to this, but you do have like a hard stop. I want to kind of fast forward on the blog series. If you want the details, sure, go read it. It's worthwhile. I have all the links in the show notes. Bookmark them. If you're running
Thank you.
or working out, just bookmark them. I
Thank
got
you.
that feedback a lot of times. Well, I know these show notes are great, but then I'm like running 6 miles an hour on the treadmill. I can't do that. So okay, it's in the show notes. Bookmark it. Go read it later. But so what now, Tim? Like, what's your next like 6 month look like? Sipping my Thai on the Hawaii beach
Oh,
somewhere,
man. No, no, I got a lot of work ahead of
or
me, actually. I just went back to Cisco.
yep.
I actually really enjoyed working for Cisco before. I only left it because I really wanted to get into cloud networking, and they didn't have anything at the time.
And now you could do both.
Well, since then, they made some really good acquisitions, like Isovalent, for example. They did Valtix a couple years ago as well. But like To me, the Isovalent acquisition was really, really clear. Like that sent a clear signal to me that Cisco was actually thinking about cloud and also, Kubernetes and just in general, like what that space looks like. And because it was a really good acquisition to make, like a really solid acquisition, it made me think, okay, cool. So I work in the routing business unit now in Cisco. So, we're doing lots of stuff to pull the, like Meraki and Catalyst, and it's all going to be called Cisco Secure from here on. And
Okay.
the point is, we're bringing it all together. We're doing something that I complained about years ago when I worked for Cisco, which is
Did you say I told you so, or like did you just leave that out during the interview loop?
what's funny is the people I was interviewing with, I actually worked with many years ago as well. It just happens to work out that way that that's where they ended up as well. So it was really good to be able to do that. But anybody who really has put time in at Cisco knows that Cisco's greatest strength is also has traditionally always been its greatest weakness as well, which is the integration piece, right? So Cisco
Yeah.
has a huge portfolio.
You mean all the iOS look the same, or like there's no NXOS, OS XR, XE? Like I could go on, right? Like I got 10 fingers. I could just,
You're gonna need more than that.
yeah,
But yeah.
precisely. Let me take off my socks.
But and it's the good thing and the bad thing, right? So from a bad thing, it means that, nobody wants to have 10,000 ways to do the same thing, right? Nobody wants to
Yeah.
watch 18 different dashboards for like all these different products and whatnot. But it gives you the ability to do something good if you sit down and do it, which is if you actually build meaningful integration. If you truly take, I'm Cisco here and I'm Cisco here, and these products need to be able to integrate in a meaningful way rather than just kind of like a throwaway kind of integration. If you can make that work, if you would truly integrate it, your competition would really struggle against you because they don't
Mm.
have a truly integrated story. And people are going, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the pendulum swings a lot, right? So a few years ago, we were very much in the best in breed point solutions bucket where we're going to build the best thing out there. We're going to collect all the things that are, they're all going to do the best thing. Now we're swinging really hard back into platformization where we
Hmm.
want one platform that's going to do as much as possible. And it's just, that's what people want for whatever reason right now. I have thoughts about that. I went over it on our podcast one time, but yeah, not to take another 20 minutes here since I do have to, but
It's all
yeah.
right. I'll put in the show notes on the Cable and Cloud podcast, and I'm gonna go on. And I look forward to chatting with you more on everything that you guys have going on. And I've just been following from afar, but congratulations on continuing. I know how tough it is to just continue to dish out content week after week and make it relevant, make it interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, Tim, I really appreciate you coming on. I feel like I need to take a deep breath, like after reading your series,
Thank
it's
you.
like I feel like I've gone through that whole journey with you, right? So it's really well written as an author.
Mm,
Congratulate on that
thank you.
series, on being transparent and interesting and honest. So I want to ask you one last question. It's not going to be a tough one. It's just, hey, if you weren't in networking, what do you think you would be doing?
Oh, that's a really good question, man. Oh my gosh.
Well, you did mention you had a passion for
I
writing.
do. I do. Yes.
You're also multifaceted. So, hey, for those of you who don't know, Tim actually speaks very fluent Japanese. And
Very whoa, very fluid.
oh,
It's
okay,
not
wow. Let me tone that back. Maybe I oversold it a little bit.
a little bit.
So for people who don't know, like Japan actually has several degrees of like it's just like Taekwondo, whatever, right? You have different belts. So they have
Yeah.
different degrees of officially certifying you for how fluent you are in Japanese. So Tim is at what, 3?
I failed my three by a little bit this time, so I'm at four. Yeah, I was close to three, so I'll get it next year. But yeah,
No worries. I'll pretend that you're 3. So it's
I
like, okay,
appreciate that.
you're good enough to like work for a Japanese company as a English
Almost.
speaking native, right? So, okay. So back to the question. If you weren't in networking, what do you think you would be doing?
So in high school, I thought for sure I was going to end up being a writer.
No kidding. Okay.
I mean, like a fiction writer, like a sci-fi or fantasy or something like that.
Okay. Your parents must be like, oh, you're gonna make big bucks.
Oh yeah, no, not so much.
Stephen King's Here We Come.
Unless you can pull off a Stephen King, you're definitely not going to make a huge amount of money.
Right.
I enjoy that. I still enjoy that. I'd never written a fiction book. I'm thinking about maybe trying now that I know that Drew has
Oh no,
several of
no, you
them.
just spilled the beans.
No, he's got them on Amazon. You can
Oh,
go on
okay,
Amazon and
okay.
get them. You can go on Amazon and get them right now. Like,
Yes,
yeah, he's got like two of them are out on Amazon.
that's right.
The other thing, I actually really enjoy cooking, oddly enough. I'm not like amazing at it, but I enjoy that you can kind of not turn your brain off, but like you can follow the pattern and kind of end up with good food. I enjoy feeding good food to people. So I
Right.
can't decide either writer or chef, or probably I probably have to do both because neither of those pay particularly amazing.
Hey, you know what? You could be a chef and then you could be on TV. You could do podcasts talking about cooking and write about, maybe like a fictional story. And by the way, Drew's books, yes, obviously, I bought both of them. The Haunting of Edward Drake, that was
Yeah.
the most recent one. And then Westland Blues, I will also, but that was a few years ago, which I only
Mm,
discovered recently. So I'll include those. And yeah, you're right. I think all of us needs hobbies outside of technology. So even if you can do those full time
yeah.
cooking and writing and I don't know podcasting, those are good ways to go as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like we could go on just like every episode I talk to you. I've talked to you before, and it's like spent hours just chatting without even the record buttons on. But we are approaching our limit that we self set. Any
Mhm.
call to action, last words, anything that you want to that we haven't covered that you do want to call out? Here's your chance, Tim.
I mean, well, you're gonna have the podcast in the show notes. So I don't have to. I don't have to. But Chris would be mad if I didn't make some kind of call to action. Come check out the Cables to Clouds podcast. I mean, honestly, there's probably a good amount of overlap between our listeners anyway, like the people that would appreciate it. The other thing is, I want to address the honesty thing because I think that, I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll get a cease and desist letter tomorrow, but who knows? I don't know if it was truly brave or not, but like I have some leeway, if you will. People know me decently in this industry, so I felt not safe, but like just real. It's real, right? Again, I didn't want to focus on Aviatrix as a company. I wanted to focus on the industry. But like what I found really interesting is as I was writing the series, because I staggered it over several days,
Sure.
I was getting messages from people that were like, wow.
From this dude called Eric too.
Yeah, from
Eric
this
Cho.
dude called Eric Cho
It's
True.
like what?
But how many people really it resonated with who've gone through similar, change the company name, right? Like you have that similar journey. And that I never knew because we don't talk about it. So
Right.
yeah, it was really interesting.
Okay. Well, you just gave me so much ideas for like additional shows or even completely different podcasts, right? Because we do need to discuss these stuff that nobody's talking about, and
Yeah,
why not us, right? Like,
absolutely.
so. But anyways, so Tim, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate you making the time. I enjoyed our conversation as always, and don't forget check out Cables to Clouds as well as all the links in the show notes, his blogs. If people were to pick 1 out of 5, which one would you say? I have my answer. I'll save until
Out of the 5 blogs?
yeah.
That's a tough one because, like, you can't I mean, I don't know how you would start at anything but the beginning because if you read the last one, you wouldn't have any context about how you got there.
Well, you listen to this episode, so you know the context, right? All right, so
That's fair. Yeah, in that case, then if you're gonna read any of them, then yeah, I would say probably read the last one and see how it ends.
okay. I like the third one because I think the third one actually really
Ah.
begins to, dive deeper into it. The first two were just kind of like setting out the stage. Third is the
Mm.
climax, and then the 4 and 5 was the finale, right? So I like the three. Yeah, yeah. As a writer, right? You got to go through the hero's journey.
Yeah, no, that's good. Don't forget what I said. Listen to what Eric said. If you're gonna read any of them, read the third one. I like that. I appreciate that.
All right. Thanks again, Tim. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Network Automation Nerds. Do you have any feedbacks for Network Automation, our awesome guest team today, or this episode? Please do send us some follow-ups at packetpushers.net/follow-up. We want to hear from you. Check out our website at packetpushers.net to find other networking engineering focused blogs, YouTube videos, podcasts, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave us a review wherever you get your podcast. Your review helps other network engineers to discover the show and keep us motivated to bring you more great content like this. Last but not least, remember that too much network automation would never be enough.